This is a sports catastrophe production.
Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Driving, welcoming you to another sports catastrophe on this day. And on this day, May 11th, 1972, something shocking happened to the San Francisco Giants. That's right. They traded away an icon, the greatest player to play for both New York and the New York Giants and the San Francisco Giants. Now, to be clear, for those of you who don't know, the New York Giants are a football team, yes, but there was a baseball team called the New York Giants. They played at the Polo Grounds, one of the most famous stadiums in history because of its weird dimensions. And we're not just talking about the short 250 plus foot alleys to left and right field, but center field was 460 plus feet. It's like, holy crap. Such a stadium exists. I believe it was 1958 when baseball changed the rules saying that any new ballpark had to have fences of about 320 down the lines and 400 in center. Now, of course, stadiums still in use at that time were grandfathered, meaning that they didn't have to change their dimensions and all that, such as Wrigley and Fenway Park, which are the only two stadiums to still be in existence before the dimensions rule. But anyway, the Polo Grounds is great. It's like one of the best games ever. If you play video games with old stadiums, it's one of the most prominent baseball stadiums of all time. But anyway, the New York Giants came from 1883 to 1957 before moving to San Francisco. By the way, the Giants were going to move first. They had no qualms in moving from San Francisco outwards. From Polo Grounds elsewhere. Unlike the Dodgers, where they almost stayed in Brooklyn. But anyway, yes. So anyways, Willie Mays started his career as a New York Giant. He would have his career cut short for a few years due to the military. You know, the Korean War was still around. That's why Ted Williams was not playing for a few seasons. So anyway, Willie Mays was an icon. 1954, he proved it by basically making that catch, the great catch, over-the-shoulder catch off of Vic Wertz in the 1954 World Series. But people forget that Willie Mays had to when he spun around and threw the ball in the infield, it was for a reason, because at the Polo Grounds, everything was so deep that a player could take a two-base sac fly. So basically, the runner could have scored. Well, one runner scored, but basically his throw to second base meant that the guy couldn't move to third base on the play. So basically, that was more prominent than you think it was. And of course, his heroics helped the Giants sweep the Indians in the World Series 4-0. So Willie Mays was an icon for the Giants. He basically was part of a triumph, or I don't know how you say it, but triumvirate, a trio of center fielders who were big. Duke Snider for the Dodgers, Mickey Mantle for the Yankees, and Willie Mays for the Giants. So basically, it was huge. Willie Mays was an icon and over 500 home runs in a Giants outfit. That's huge. And he didn't skip a beat when he moved to San Francisco with the Giants. Unfortunately, though, despite Willie Mays' 600 plus home runs, a lot of people said that it could have been up to 700 if it weren't for his home ballpark screwing him over. Well, yeah, he had a lot of shots to center field that would have been home runs in normal parks. But anyhow, Candlestick Park basically had ruined his career in a sense because of the famous wins off San Francisco. Things at the park are so bad that basically people wore jackets to Giants games, even though it was in California and it's supposed to be like sunny and warm. All that. Regardless, Willie Mays was an essential icon, and basically a lot of people liked him. The only problem is that, well, Willie Mays is still alive, but anyway, the only problem is that the San Francisco Giants, after a while, started to slump. They had a few good runs in the 60s. 62, they were almost World Series champions against the Yankees in Game 7, but unfortunately, Willie McCovey did not put the ball high enough that Bobby Richardson could not spear it at second base. And it was immortalized in a Peanuts cartoon. And Charlie Brown says, "Oh, why did Willie not hit that ball 2 feet higher?" And all that. Still iconic. But, well, McCovey. But anyway, Willie Mays is still an icon. As I said. However, the Giants, after a 69 pennant chase that basically ended up losing the division to the Atlanta Braves and Hank Aaron, were finished kaput. They tried their best, but basically Willie Mays was aging. Well, I mean, he's been in the major leagues for 2 decades, and, you know, they need to think about the future. So they did the unthinkable. They traded Willie Mays away. Yes, they traded him to the New York Mets for, I don't know what the trade was for, but does it really matter? But anyway, he was traded to the New York Mets. It was like, what the hell? Why did the San Francisco Giants do that? He was still doing decent. Ironically, though, the Giants traded Willie Mays when they were in Shea Stadium for a series. That's what some teams do. For example, Ichiro was traded from Seattle to the Yankees when Seattle played a series at Yankee Stadium. So he just basically went to the other team's dugout. Same ballpark, but different dugout. Willie Mays did have some good moments for the New York Mets, but basically, you know, his age showed. And Willie Mays could have been easily a major GOAT in the 1973 World Series in Game 2 because with the Mets up by 1, Tom McGraw was home for the save. But unfortunately, Willie Mays made a bad judgment call on a fly ball to center field and stumbled, and the ball got past him. Oakland would score the tying run that time. Thankfully for Mays, the Mets would have a 3-run win thanks to a couple of miscues from Oakland's Mike Andrews at second base. Sadly, though, Willie Mays did not get a World Series in his final season, especially with the Mets, as they lost Game 7 to Oakland in Oakland. I mean, the Mets should be praised. I mean, the team was only a few games above 500, and they beat the powerhouse Reds in the NLCS, and they forced Oakland to a Game 7. That's hard to do. The 73 Mets are really underrated. They're heroics. They're a true Cinderella story, even though they lost in the final. But, still. So, anyway, yeah. That was not a good trade by any stretch of the imagination. Willie Mays in a Mets jersey. Okay, yeah, want to bring him back to New York, but the Giants still could have used him somehow. And he would have retired as Giant and reached the pantheon of many players who actually played for 2+ decades with one team. And Yastrzemski and Ted Williams for the Yankees. The Yankees. The Bull Sox. So, yeah. It did hurt San Francisco in the long run. They slid off the map. They almost went to Toronto, but they had that injunction that saved their butts. They had some financial and franchise instability for years to come. And then 1989 came. They got to the World Series, but then that earthquake. But happy ending for the Giants, for San Francisco, because they won 3 World Series in the 2010s. All 3 times I picked the other team to win the World Series. Fuck me. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.